Hello, fellow readers. I am the Bristly Bear, and I want to thank you for coming to my channel. Um, Today, I want to talk about fantasy books. Now, I've seen a lot of video reviews online regarding top 10 fantasy books, etc., and I constantly see the same names and books being thrown around. Everything from The Lord of the Rings to current authors like Sanderson and Jemison and Patrick Rothfuss, may he ever finish his trilogy. And these are all wonderful books, amazing reads, and amazing authors. However, there is a period of books I find that seems to be missing from most of these lists. And these are the books that I grew up reading. And these would be books that were written around the 70s and 80s. I think that these books don't come up so often, perhaps because they're no longer in print, which does not mean that they're not available. They probably just aren't going to be as easy to find or be offered on Amazon, etc. So today I wanted to talk to you about 3 fantasy series books I feel have been forgotten by the current readers. And I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to know that these exist. And if you're looking for something wonderful to read in the fantasy genre, I really highly suggest that you give these a try. So with that in mind, I want to tell you about my top 3 forgotten fantasy series. The first series that I want to discuss with you is called The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever, written by Stephen R. Donaldson in 1977. Now, these books are on an epic scale that I would most readily compare to the Lord of the Rings or other Tolkien books. However, they're written with a very different writing style and a completely different flavor to those books. One of the things I appreciate most about Donaldson's writing is that his story is told largely through dialogue among the characters, instead of long paragraphs of describing everything and long paragraphs of histories. You learn most about what's going on through the dialogue of the characters. This story focuses on a world which the inhabitants call the Land, and it is epic in scale. It is full of the most interesting characters and different races and creatures, the likes of that I have never read in any other books since. It focuses, however, on a man named Thomas Covenant who lives on our world in modern day times. He's a writer, or was a writer, and has contracted leprosy, which is a disease that causes you to no longer be able to feel anything sensory with your body. And if you ever hurt yourself, it can become infected and gangrenous and would have to be cut away. And he's already lost a couple of fingers to one of his hands because they became gangrenous. Now, this disease, which is incurable, has caused his wife to leave him and take their child, has caused the community that he has grown up in and lived in all of his life to completely shun him and out of ignorance never want him to come into town or be around anyone. And this has caused him to become extremely bitter and angry and pretty much become a shut-in on the farm that he owns and lives on in this town. However, a day comes when he is forced to go into town to deal with a utility bill, and he ends up getting hit by a car. When he wakes up, he's no longer on our Earth, and instead he is in this land, high on a promontory, hundreds and hundreds of feet up in a mountain, and being addressed by a disembodied voice of a creature called Lord Fowl. This creature is the opposite of the creator of this land, so is essentially this land's Satan. And he is addressing Thomas Covenant and explaining that he has brought him to this land so that he can use him to destroy it. Thomas Covenant possesses a wedding ring that is made out of white gold, which is an element that does not exist in this universe. And in fact, this element can control what is called wild magic. And this wild magic is capable of breaking the arch of time, in other words, the regular flow of time within this universe. And this arch of time has been created by the creator to keep Lord Fowl imprisoned on this land. Lord Fowl has every intention of manipulating Thomas Covenant into using the wild magic and causing it to break the arch of time and release him from his eternal prison. Now, Thomas Covenant goes out into this land and goes on epic quests with the people there that he meets. However, he doesn't believe any of it is real. He believes that he is dreaming. And because of his bitterness and his rage about everything and his complete distrust of anyone around him, he's very much an anti-hero. And he constantly struggles with the fact that on one hand, he is loving the experience because the health and beauty of this land have actually cured his leprosy. He can now feel again. He loves that, of course. However, he completely distrusts it because he knows that it is causing him to lose the disciplines he needs to survive when he wakes up, returning to his own world and time. The people of the land that he meets are all so helpful and kind and want to help him reach this goal of facing Lord Fowl ultimately and preventing the destruction of their world, of course. However, they also struggle with the fact that he simply does not believe that they're real. So this is a series of epic quests, much like a Tolkien book, where they travel across this extremely well fleshed out world, encountering all the positive and negative traits of it, the creatures that want to help them and the creatures that, of course, want to destroy them. All the while with Thomas Covenant struggling with his beliefs about everything that's going on. So I have read these books over and over, and in fact, just doing this review caused me to begin the first series again, and I'm enjoying it just as much as I ever did. It is a series of, there are 2 trilogies, and then the last is a set of 4 books that Donaldson only just finished writing relatively recently. So I highly recommend starting at least the first trilogy. And I think that if you read that trilogy, you're going to want to continue along with the story. Each book involves him going to this land and returning afterward, and then going back into that land in the subsequent books and returning. So you get to constantly see the dichotomy of him struggling with the reality of what is going on with him. So that is the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever, and it begins with a book called Lord Fowl's Bane, written in 1977. The second series that I want to discuss with you is called The Books of Swords by Fred Saberhagen, begun in 1983. Now, this is simply a fun set of stories to read, and it focuses on a world where the gods, because they're bored, create 12 magical swords, each sword having a very specific ability that it can do. And they spread them throughout their world so that they can watch it as a great game and create chaos and just enjoy sitting back and seeing the chaos that they've created on the world. Now, these are very interesting swords. I'll give you some examples. There's Coin Spinner, which is a sword that gives you amazing luck in anything that you try to do. However, it has the downside of suddenly disappearing at a moment's thought and going to a new owner, often when it's least convenient for it to do so. There is Farslayer. Now, this sword will allow you to name anyone on the entire world and say that you want to kill them, and that sword will instantly fly to where that person is and slay them. However, the downside of this sword is that it doesn't return. So by doing so, you will also be leaving it in the hands of the enemy, and now they have the ability to do the same to you if they know who sent it. There is only one protection that people are aware of, and that is one of the other swords, and it is called Shield Breaker. Shield Breaker will protect you from any kind of attack that comes against you, except, as a downside, anyone who is not wielding a weapon. So it will protect you from the instant kill of Farslayer. However, it won't protect you from someone that sneaks up to you and manages to kill you without you being able to see them. So there's a lot of interesting ways you can still die against someone that's not actually wielding a weapon. And as one more example, there is the sword Wayfinder, which will allow you to name and find anything or anyone anywhere on the world, and it will lead you towards them. However, it will always lead you within the most direct path, which very likely is going to be also the most dangerous path. So that is just an example of the 12 swords that exist in this universe. And it is all about the people that are trying to get control of them. There are factions like a mysterious emperor who is trying to hoard the swords. There is a sect of religious fanatics that are trying to get the swords, and there are creatures that they call demons that have been created that are being used to try to collect these swords. What I find very fascinating and fun about this is the clever and interesting ways people try to deal with the abilities of these swords. The ways you just wouldn't necessarily immediately think of when you've got a sword like Coin Spinner, giving you the luck of the gods. So it's all about the interplay between the people that own them. Now, there is a series of books that follow some characters throughout. However, there are also some books that are more anthology-like, that focus on just a specific sword and somebody who owns it for a short period of time, which are also just as enjoyable to read. So if you want something full-on fantasy and extremely fun, then I suggest you give the Books of Swords by Saberhagen a try. The first one is called simply The First Book of Swords. Now, the last series I want to discuss with you is called The Chronicles of Amber, written by Roger Zelazny and begun in 1970. The first novel of the series is called 9 Princes in Amber. And this was a very well-received series of books. In fact, it spawned computer games, role-playing games, comic books. So if you've never had the opportunity to read any of Zelazny's work, and particularly this series of books, I highly recommend that you give them a try. They are very fast-moving, very easy to read books, and I really fell in love with the main character, Corwin, of this series. It involves a man, Corwin, who wakes up in a hospital in modern day Earth, wakes up in a hospital and has amnesia, has no idea who he is, and begins to suspect that he's being sedated and kept prisoner, basically, in this hospital. Of course, he has no idea why, because he doesn't even know who he is. He does manage to escape from the hospital, and in doing so, realizes that he is much stronger physically than any normal human should be. And this becomes one of his first clues that something unusual is going on. As he gets out, he starts to try to discover who it is that was keeping him held prisoner in this hospital and why. He comes upon a man that claims to be one of his brothers and offers to take him home, which turns out to be something a lot more unusual than he was expecting. He pretends that he knows who he is, and through clever manipulation is slowly learning facts about himself as he goes along. But he's not prepared for when he gets in a car ride with his brother and the world about him starts to shift and change. Elements of it being removed and new elements being brought in. Skies turning different colors and trees turning into completely different images. And everything is completely shifted and changed as they drive until they end up in a completely different world, basically a fantasy world, where slowly he finds out that he is one of the royalty that rule this world, one of 9 brothers and 4 sisters, and that this world called Amber is actually the one true world throughout the multiverse, and that every other possible world that they have the ability to travel to is merely a reflection, or what they consider a shadow, of this real world, which is called Amber. As the story goes on, he finds out that the king is now missing, and there is very much a power struggle going on between the family members on who is going to take the throne in the king's absence. So he has a lot of mysteries to solve. Which one of his siblings was keeping him an amnesiac on this one shadow realm called our Earth? And where has the king gone? And which one of them is going to take over the throne, and where does he fall within this pecking order? So as you can imagine, there's a lot of intrigue happening between the family in Amber, a lot of mysteries to be solved. There's a lot of very cool ideas that Zelazny uses within his books. One of them is that each of the family members has a deck of cards, much like a tarot deck. And on these cards are pictures of each of his family members, as well as other characters that he encounters, and even other places and shadow earths. And by concentrating on a card, he can bring it to life and communicate with that person, or even step into where they are or go to that place on the card. Another one is that in order to be able to shift realities and travel through the multiverse, they need to traverse this thing that they call the pattern, which is somewhat like a Celtic maze that they walk on that resists them to the point of, if they go off the path, they will be destroyed. And he knows he needs to walk this pattern to get his memories back and his own ability to travel throughout the realms. So, fascinating, easy to read books. I very much enjoyed them. These are probably my favorite fantasy novels of all time, and I have reread them repeatedly over the years. There is the first set of books involving Corwin. There's also then a second set of books involving his son, Merlin, which comes later. It's not the Merlin that we know from the Camelot tales. However, that Merlin may just be a shadow version of him for all they know. But I have read them both, loved them both. Well, I suppose equally, although I did really enjoy the second series a little bit more. However, I don't think they're talked about a lot, and I want to make sure you are aware of them. And that is the Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zelazny. And with that, I conclude my telling you of 3 forgotten fantasy series that I think you really should give a try, and I think you will fall in love with as much as you have fallen in love with books by more recent authors. So thank you for visiting my channel. If you enjoyed what I had to present to you, please like and subscribe. I could use the subscribers since I'm new with this channel, and I really look forward to being able to talk to you again in some of my other reviews. Thank you.